Well, good evening to everybody. Thank you very much for logging into us this evening. My name's Trevor Smitheram. I'm one of the volunteers. I look a bit bright here in a minute with the camera looking in me. I'm one of the volunteers that say for Hayle Heritage Centre. And tonight I have with me Daisy, who's our curator of the Heritage Centre.
Hello.
This is our first go at having a little bit of history on like this. So if you're pleased, hopefully that with what we're producing tonight, we will be doing some more. And at the end, when I finish, if you would like to ask any questions, please, whatever you do on your phones, send them to us and I shall be here for a bit longer to answer your questions. Now tonight, I'm talking about the Cornish Copper Company. We hear a lot about Harvard's, but let's just do a little bit about the Cornish Copper Company. Now, what I'll say first is that they were actually formed in 1754. And they went to a place called Carn Entrol, which is up near Canberra. And there was three men. There was John Trevennan, John Vivian, and George John. They were all Canberra men. They were really the instigators of the Cornish Copper Company. Now, they realized that when they went to Carn Entrol, with all the material they needed and the supplies and all, they needed water, they needed transport, etc., etc. So in 1756, they come to Hayle. They come to a place called Copperhouse, as we call it now. But long before then, it was called Benton League Town. So right now, if you imagine when you're taking tin out of the ground, for every 100 tons of ore that you get out, you get approximately 55 tons of tin. But with a copper process, for every 100 tons of copper ore that you take out, you get approximately 8 tons of copper. So you can imagine a lot of waste. So they come down to Hayle, as I said, in 1756. And just one other little thing, so I can go on and do a bit more talking. They finished the Cornish Copper Company actually finished producing copper in about 1817, 1818, because they found an open cast mine up in North Wales, and with mining it down in Cornwall, it got very expensive. So that thing, but they carried on as the Cornish Copper Company, making iron, casting iron, etc., like Harvard's of Hayle, up until 1869. And then, of course, Harvard's of Hayle, as we know, bought them out. I'm just going to show you a few slides now. I'll just be back in the shadows a little bit. Okay, this is the map of coming into Hayle there, and this is where they had to go right up there. This is this is Harvard's down here, but we're talking tonight about the Cornish Copper Company. It was their main office. I hope everybody can see these. These are back to front as far as I'm concerned, but this was the main office, which is up in Market Street, which is where, if anybody that knows Hayle, where the cinema was, St George's Hall was the Hayle Cinema, was up in behind that. These buildings are still here. Now, this is what we call a piece of scoria. Now, you only get scoria from copper, from the waste from the copper is called scoria. Now, because Harvard's was down this end, from the Standard Inn all the way up through into Copperhouse now, a lot of the houses are actually built of scoria block. Now, this is a better map. This is South Quay, if anybody that knows Hayle at all. This is where Asda is now. This is East Quay. There's the gasworks. This is where the Cornish Copper Company had to go all the way up there to Copperhouse itself. So they had a long way to go. This was one of their main offices. I put this in specifically to show you the lovely clock and the cupola, which was on top. And the people that worked for the Cornish Copper Company, it was a bell up there that rang so that you had to come to work and when you leave for work. Of course, this building is still there, but the clock, as we know, is gone now. These are one of the buildings, which was the Cornish Copper Company, which was actually there until the 1960s. This was still there. This is by Luke's Copper Terrace, but there's J&F Pools there. Of course, J&F Pools come into Hayle in 1848. That's another story for when you want me to have a chat of that. This is the same building, all being taken down. That's another part of the offices from the Cornish Copper Company. This was J&F Pools, took it over afterwards. Now this is in behind what we call the cinema. These were some of the old buildings from the Cornish Copper Company. They've knocked all this down now and it's flats. Here we are. This is another one. This was a shop that was there. This was taken in 1963. And then, of course, they're all gone now, completely demolished. We'll go on to this one. Now, I put this one in. This is the garage that's there today. If you come to Hayle, you'll see the garage, petrol there. That was part of the Cornish Copper Company, the rope making. And they did make rope, same as Arby, as I said, from about 1819. It was cast in iron. And this is where the rope making production was, all in this here. Not in them buildings, but in the proper sheds. But in 1972, everything all right? In 1972, they were putting a new sewage system up through Hayle. And when they come up this end, up near the petrol station, when they started digging down, they found scoria waste, which was, when it was red hot, it was, let's say, slag, 5 feet thick. So what you can well imagine what the trouble they had getting through, because it's really, really strong material. You cannot drill it. It's like, well, it's just so hard. It's unbelievable. But this is where the petrol station is now. Now, right opposite the petrol station, Paddy's Mill. They had a mill. I've often wondered, why it was called Paddy's Mill? It wasn't because he was an Irishman. It's just it was called Paddy's Mill. It was actually built in the early 1830s. You see the water wheel there? All this here, all this wall and all the capping stones are still there. You can see them all there. This was taken down in the 1930s, demolished completely, except for the chimney. And that's the Paddy's Mill. And of course, they used the water wheel to grind the corn because they needed to feed all the mules, horses, etc., that were coming in from Camborne. And they needed grain and food, and the horses then were kept up near the towns on the farm up there. Now, this is a very interesting building. This was one where John Wesley preached in. Now, I've been reading a lot. It says in here something like 18, but he actually preached in this. This is built as scoria block, and this was down near the commercial pub in Hayle. It was built in behind. John Wesley first preached in there in September 1765. That's the first time it's recorded on his travels all the way through. He preached in there. But believe it or not, this was demolished in 1820, taken down and got rid of. That's one of the, I can't quite read it, but it says one of the things. Oh, right. Now, if anybody knows where Julian Foy's is in Hayle, which is opposite the cinema, as I said, all this was to do with the Cornish Copper Company. There, look, there's Paddy's Mill. We used to call this John Daniel's grocery shop. A lot of people might know where that is. But you look here, this was this is the river. This was the turning area for the ships that the Cornish Copper Company would have all their material coming in and coming out. And this was the turning area for the ships. It's now one big car park. This is a very, very old photograph. And this, I've got a photograph of that in there. But there's, just to point out, there's Paddy's Mill and there's the chimney there. This here, I showed you that little church there, a chap a minute ago. This here was how scoria was used. This was built again in 1763. This was the Sunday school at that time for that chapel where John Wesley preached. This building is still standing. Now, if you worked for the Cornish Copper Company, you didn't have to buy the scoria block. You could have them to build because they wanted you to work for them and stay there. So you could actually have them all for nothing. But you imagine they have 3 different sizes and they're really classed as A, B, and C. And of course, they have you'll see on one of the drawings in a minute, they have capping stones as well. So in the early 1760s, they were actually making blocks for building houses. So they were very environmentally friendly as far as I'm concerned. They were using all that waste. This just shows us the same building, and up there, up the top up there, it says 1913. But that's just the Philip Church Hall. As you can see that, if you come down to Hayle, you'll be able to see that anyhow. Still there. Now, these were taken right opposite, again, all to do with the Cornish Copper Company. These were taken off the buildings. It's now what we call the Cinnamon Trust, not here, but it's taken off by the road. Just up this end up there, they had their own gasworks. Because the gasworks for the whole of Hayle, Harvey's had their own gasworks, the Cornish Copper Company had their gasworks. But it was all connected eventually in 1890 to service the town. But there they are, taking down one of the buildings. There it is, gone. This building is still there, this one, but the wall is gone from there now. And these are all scoria block. You'll notice that in Copperhouse, a lot of scoria block up there because the Cornish Copper Company didn't get on with Harvey's of Hayle. They had a 30-year war. So if it was down Harvey's working, you couldn't get no scoria block at all. Now the famous bridge, the Black Bridge. Reverend Ockham, who's the vicar up in the church up there, he reckoned the roads that he was going on in Hayle was pretty rough, so he decided to use the scoria block. Here's what I'm saying, but the capping stones on the top. And this here bridge was completed in 1818. And of course, people say, well, why one arch bigger than the other? Well, when Reverend Ockham wanted to come down from Philip and go down to Foundry in his boat or go down to St. Owen's Church, even if the tide was in, he could row underneath that archway there. So that bridge is still there. And of course, you see all this pool is made out of a scoria block. And each block there weighs something like 100 to 200 some are 300. This is looking down, this is where the Cornish Copper Company were. You imagine they dug all this out, and all these are scoria block, which you can see today. There we are. This is all scoria block. This is where the boats used to come up and unload. And when they melted the copper, it was then transported to St. Erse and to the hammer mills down in St. Erse, where it was beaten into flat and then transported all over the country. This is the copper that was. And that's why it's called Battery Mill Lane, because there was batter, believe it or not. That's why they called it that. Now, a little bit of here is a row of houses. They are now, it's called Luke's Copper Terrace. But when the Cornish Copper Company, this is where all the furnaces were. 26 furnaces working, smelting all the copper ore there. A gentleman went to South Africa, which is called Luke, and he come back in the year 1900, and he actually had this road, because it was waste ground then, he had this row of houses built. And then he had another one up by the petrol station in the name of his daughter, which was Beatrice. This is just a back view. There's the wheel, and there's Paddy's, and this is part of the Cornish. It's an old photo, but there's the Cornish Copper Company buildings there. Of course, they had to sluice as we got in now. We got a lot of sand problems. We've been sluicing for years, but even in the 1700s, they built sluice gates so they could hold the tide back, because they had a long way to come up with their boats, and then to sluice all the way to get the sand out the way. This is over in the Philip Church. This is the vestry over there. You can see it all. Look at the size of the scoria block. But the church had to pay sixpence in them days for 20 block. They didn't get away scot-free. They had to buy them. But all over there and down a place called the Lant Station, the Sultans, all the walls there are lined with scoria block. This is a little chimney that was up right opposite that petrol station that you saw there. Look, this was 1964. That was all was left of Paddy's Mill. There we are. There's the archway, which is still there, which was feeding from the wheel. And there's the chimney there. And the next one should show it. There we go. The demolition of the grist mill at Copperhouse. It was 1982. It was 150 years old. Gone down one weekend. I put these in as well because, as I said, the other chapel was demolished in 1820, but you can hardly see it there. But I got other photos, but we haven't got a time. But there's a big chapel there, and that was built in 1815, and that's why they demolished the smaller one. And up there was a school as well. But look, these are the terraces that was built when they went from copper to iron. They needed more men, the Cornish Copper Company. This is 1963, but look, these are what the houses was like. This is Church Street and St. John Street, which was just down where all the smelting was going on. This was the big chapel that they built, as I said, in 1815, and it was demolished in the 1980s, 1990s nearly. And this is an inside view of that lovely chapel. I think that's the end of that. But now, if anybody, I know it seems as though I've rushed it a bit, but I just think that's just nothing compared to what the the Cornish Copper Company or Harbours of Hayle or the Electric Works or the Dynamite Works. There's so much history in Hayle, and it really needs to come out to you people out there. Glitches. I hope that you've enjoyed the little short story that we've given you tonight. And if there's any questions that you would like to ask me, I'm still here. Whatever you got to do, because I'm not.
Yes. Hello. Sorry. You can type questions into the comment section down below if you want to ask Trevor anything. Nope.
I should have said as well, on an average year, the yield of copper down here, and a lot of it come from Camborne and Redruth, etc., all this area, was 6,000 tons of copper ore. Copper was produced in those short years.
Okay, we've got 39 people watching, Trevor. It's a bit more than we were expecting. That's great. Does anyone have any questions? No? Oh, so Joe is asking, what did they produce in Paddy's Mill?
Well, Paddy's Mill was used for grinding the corn. With the wheel, with the water, that's what it was basically built for, was to grind the corn. It didn't do anything else really, grind the corn to feed all the mills and the horses that were transporting all the way from Camborne, Redruth, Halston, which was copper ore really, and iron down there. Because they didn't have nothing to do with harvest. That's another little, well, we could go on for hours here really, but really, really interesting. But that's what Paddy's Mill was for. Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Good question, thank you.
When all this is over, all this virus thing and all, which it's affected us all, Daisy here arranges tours around Foundry, around Copper House, or anything like that. You can get hold of Daisy at the Hayle Heritage Centre, and hopefully when all this is in, you can come down. And if you wanted somebody like me to take you around a little bit and show you a few of the historical Hayle, then we'd be so delighted.
Okay, thank you. I've seen that a few of you have subscribed to our channel, so thank you very much for that. So unless we have any more questions from anybody, I just want to thank you to Trevor. That was really interesting. We are hoping to do more of these videos in the coming weeks, so take a look at our Facebook page where we'll be posting them as events. Obviously, everything's kind of gone a bit of an unexpected way this year. We had intended to do our monthly talks program as usual, but we're having to do it this way instead. If therefore anybody would like to donate to the Heritage Centre to help support us through this difficult time, you can do that via our PayPal account, which is on our website. Thank you so much to anyone that can. So, and of course, if anybody has any suggestions for other videos we can do, then, you know, just send me an email and we can do that for you. So Michael is asking, was the Phoenix Works the site of the original smelter?
No, the Phoenix Works was J&F Pools, which they came in 1848. They were still there really in the year 1998 they actually finished, because they got bought out, but there was an actual family firm. But the Cornish Copper Company were in they were in front of it on the main, what we call the main road up to the petrol station. That's where all the buildings were on the first map. You know, we got other drawings as well. It's difficult to say, to give you so much information, I mean, say on a limited time, but if people are happy for myself to come back and talk about that again or something else, we can increase the time, but we just thought we would trial this. But yeah, so that really, J&F Pools, they did have part of the, and I showed you the office, the tall building. Yes, J&F Pools used a bit of that, but that is now somebody's house. There's actually a tunnel in behind that going into the hillside, but I've never been in there.
Yes, Michael says that he was brought up in Caroline Row, which backed onto Phoenix Works.
That's right, Caroline Row, yes, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Can you remember the pond? Can you remember the pond? I expect so.
Okay. There are any more questions, please do ask. Otherwise, for anyone that hasn't, please do subscribe to our new YouTube channel. We'll be putting lots of content out on here, hopefully. So you should receive a notification when we do if you subscribe. All right. I think that might be it, Trevor.
Well, thank you everybody very much. I just hope that you've enjoyed it and we've given you a little bit of
Sorry, Michael's just replied to you there. Thank you. Yes, of course. Only a true Benton League boy after you fell in to the pond.
Lovely, lovely. Yes, that's well done. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, very much. And thank you for everybody else that's listened. And I said, we hope to do this on a regular basis, but we're just sorting out the teething problems.
Yeah.
I'll get my hair cut for the next time. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope to see you here next time.
Thank you.